Hi there. I want you to understand TOGAF at a high level before we even get into Chapter 1 of the TOGA specification, because the specification doesn't really do a good job of explaining exactly what TOGAF really is and what it's used for. What we need here is an informal introduction to TOGAF before we get into the formal one. So, what is TOGAF? TOGAF is an architecture framework and is the leading standard for enterprise architecture. Like other architecture frameworks, the main purpose is to define the desired future state of an enterprise and define the steps required to reach that future state from where we are in the present state. TOGAF defines the future state of the enterprise, what it calls the target architecture, using a process called the ADM, the Architecture Development Method. The ADM is the central thesis, it's the core, it's the heart of TOGAF. TOGAF contains a lot of other things to support this process, like a way of storing and classifying documents, a governance model, reference models, and a way of developing other architecture capabilities, among many more. So you'll have to understand all of that eventually. But the first thing to understand is that there is a process for defining an enterprise architecture. So what does that get you? Why does a company need architecture? Well, that's a good question. The architecture function is what connects the overall long-term strategy of the enterprise, as defined by the executives and the board of directors, into an actual plan that gets implemented evenly across the organization. So imagine the board of directors decides that the enterprise should move more and more of its services to an online form and start to phase out some of the in-person services to customers. This is a goal that might take many years to fully implement. It probably needs to be implemented in phases. It can't just all be done at once. So how does it do it? How does the CEO? Does he just go and tell the vice presidents one day, and then the vice presidents pass the message down to their managers, and the managers pass the message down to their employees? Is that how it works? Of course not. What this needs is a plan. It needs somebody to sit back and define what services get put online and what services cannot. It needs someone to see if the underlying applications, data, and technology are already there to support such a move, or if we need to make changes to the way the company does business to support that. It needs an architecture group. Then those architects can work with the various project managers and the business managers to break that work up into phases and to make it happen according to a schedule. So TOGAF and then the ADM is a process for turning the overall executive strategy into a work plan that gets implemented. It's also a cycle that repeats. You set a goal in the future. That's called the architecture vision. And then you slowly move your business, application, data, and technology into that, meet that goal. And then when you reach that goal, you can set a new goal and set a new vision. The ADM process is so generic that any company can modify it and implement it. That's why it's an industry standard. So to summarize, TOGAF contains a process called the ADM that helps you define the future state of the enterprise. You can figure out what steps are required to get that future state from where you currently are. TOGAF contains many other tools and processes to help manage that. In today's fast-moving business environment, it's important that all parts of the business are aligned and moving in the same direction when change happens, because change is always happening. If an enterprise never changed, you would not need an architect, but very few enterprises are like that. I hope that gives you a clearer picture of what an architect does and what TOGAF is. Now let's get into studying for this exam.